Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now we have our managing director with us, Mr. Levy. We can start, and even after his arrival, the average age in this room is much younger than normal during the annual meetings, given the fact you are very young, don't get worried. But we are talking about an average age of less than 30, and I think you are a little bit more than 30, I would say. We are very happy and pleased that you are with us, Joachim, today, given your leadership on financing sustainable development, and we're equally pleased to have this distinguished panelists with us today, whom I'm going to introduce briefly, given that we shared with you some short bios about the speakers. By the way, my name is Mahmoud Muhiddin. I'm the Senior Vice President for the World Bank Group for the 2030 Agenda and the UN Relations and Partnerships. And this is part of the partnerships we are trying to establish to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. And I'm very pleased that we are doing this for the second year. The first year we did it, again, at the margins of the annual meetings, this gathering in Lima in October last year, to celebrate good contributions by a good number of participants, not just those who won the first, second, and third places, or the other runners-up and the best six, but there are many submissions and participants from around the world. I asked for an update on the statistics. We had 309 submissions received, 490 teams registered, representing about 1,550 young minds and 125 different countries. The participation was much better than last year, which was already great in starting that. We have been doing that as a good piece of collaboration with Wharton Business School. And actually, the idea itself came out back in 2014, before knowing anything about how the Finance for Development framework is going to be designed or launched in Addis in 2015. So the idea was ahead of the framework of Addis for Finance for Development. There was some discussions about the framework, but it wasn't finalized, as you know, until July 2015. The SDGs themselves were launched in September 2015. So I'm very pleased that the good collaboration with Wharton Business School and other partners around the world had been very much ahead of the game. And the idea, as I said, came out after a good invitation from my good friend Georgie to the business school, as part of a discussion of the role of the business sector in sustainable development. And in the train back, and I think it was one of those winters when the trip gets longer than the usual 90 minutes to Washington, I was very much impressed by the kind of discussion that we had in the class, and the many good solutions and offers of solution that came out from the students. So on my way back, I called Georgia. I said, well, why don't we formalize this thing and not really leave it to chances, and to have a partnership to sponsor the good ideas going forward. Now we know that there are 4 specific sources of funding for sustainable development: public finance through domestic resource mobilization, ODA, or official development assistance, which is not growing that much. And there is a role for the private sector and the business sector, domestic and international. And I'm very pleased that the winning proposals have been trying to give us solutions on how to get the best out of a mix of good finance for sustainable development. And the winning proposals met the criteria of substance, of novelty, of relevance, of possible scaling up, of depth when it is allowed to have some impact on change and on the sustainability aspect. It's tackling the different dimensions of sustainability, from economic to environmental to social development. We believe in the power of ideas. We believe in the power of partnerships to enhance these ideas and to move these ideas from good elements of thought into action. We have a new chief economist, very well known to many of you in the room, Paul Romer, who had contributed a lot to our understanding of the power of ideas, to the extent that he went against the traditional thinking of how we make production, and this is basically based on what we learned back in the school about the role of capital, labor, entrepreneurship, and land. So he went against that and saying it's about something completely different. It's about ideas, it's about people, and other things. Those other things could be land, could be capital, could be a mix of other things, but it's all about ideas and people. And in reality, we have seen how many opportunities lost when there wasn't really a good management or a good idea behind them. If you don't really believe in the power of good ideas, like the idea that we're going to follow in a minute, we can really think of bad ideas that were very much destructive to developments around the world, from ideas of subsidizing energy without limits, or employing people to solve the jobs problems in civil service beyond its capacity, or to have price or rent controls. There is a list of bad ideas, if you are interested, in this fascinating report by friends of the bank, including Mike Spence, who led this good report on growth. And if you are interested on knowing something about bad ideas, either to tell them to your enemies to follow or to avoid them, there is a list of a dozen of a bad idea that are still, unfortunately, very much around us and making bad contributions to development and sustainable development at large. Without further ado on my part, I'd like to welcome again our Managing Director and CFO, Mr. Joachim Levy, who's going to be launching the report, which is in front of you. So, yeah, for the benefit of those who are in front of the cameras, not just in the room, we have many people connected to us. So the report is out and you can access it. Joachim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's really a great privilege to participate in this occasion, this ceremony. Maybe it's too formal, but certainly in this launching of the report and also the recognition of the awards. I really have to give congratulations on this initiative, and also on the completion of the second round and the launching for next year of a third round, and not only to Mahmoud but of course to Wharton School, which have co-led this effort, and I know that it took many hours to sort out among so many good ideas, the one that might get the first and second position. I think that, of course, innovation from the youth is absolutely essential, and stimulating that and giving the tools is really a tremendous way to increase productivity. I'm reminded from time to time that Einstein, we all remember Einstein as the old guy with this big hair and so on, but he wrote the equations and got all the knowledge about especially the first relative the first theory about relativity when he was very young. He was, I think, in the 20s when he did that. So it really shows that innovation can be at any place, and probably many of you know that he was not in a big lab at that time. Actually, he was working in another career. He was an inspector of patents. So he had a job day that, of course, required some technological knowledge, but was nothing compared to what he was doing. So I think that's a really an integral part of our challenge. Many of you may have heard how the challenge today is to increase productivity. There are many ways to increase productivity. One is to get rid of these bad ideas that Mahmoud said that actually stifle the capacity of people to do their best and really to have competition on these things that in an open environment really bring the best from people and bring the best from economic system. And among these things is innovation. Innovation is crucial. When he was saying ideas, new ideas is really the way we move forward. I don't know how many of you are economists, but one of the things that economists learned very quickly was the so-called diminishing return of most factors. The only factor that really continues to be productive, and is what brings the linearity in the models of Romer that Mahmoud mentioned, is ideas. The other, if you double, usually you cannot double everything. So it means that because something you'll be missing, you're not going to get exactly double in terms of output. And ideas is the way of how you can replace the missing part, so that when you double the other factors, you continue doubling your production. So I'm not going to go too far on everything that the bank is doing, but certainly it's very much related to some of the items that have been highlighted by this competition, which is innovation also in finance. We have to find new ways of using our resources, because if you just double the resources, we're probably not going to get the results that we need. And these results in many areas are only increasing because we're getting aware of new demands. We all know the demands about health. We all know the demands about getting basic things like electricity. But now we are getting aware of new demands, which is, for instance, to ensure that we have higher standards of living, but without putting an unsustainable burden in our planet. So climate change became something that people are more and more aware, and companies are more and more aware, and you have to address that through new mechanisms. And this is exactly what the World Bank is doing. And to mobilize the resources to address these new challenges, we have to innovate in the financial area too. We have to find ways to bring the private and the public sector together to have new forms of investment. And in particular, something that probably some of my colleagues will also talk in infrastructure and in new ways to generate energy, renewable energies. And I think this is a very clear challenge for the World Bank, and where we are putting all our efforts to find new ways to finance. And also in accelerating our ability to work with our poorest members through an institution that you probably found a hashtag when you entered in our main hall, which is IDA, I-D-A. is the International Development Association. This is a part of the bank that really goes and work with the poorest and the more challenging countries. And we are doing a big replenishment now, again, with innovation, with using financial tools to make it more powerful, and with that accelerating the investments that you have to do in these areas. And some of these will be, for instance, in Nigeria, which is the country of one of the great innovation highlighted in this session. I think that the idea of having the cooperation, this crowd, I'll not say it's crowdsourcing, but crowd information, it's really one of the best advances that new technology is allowing, making us really like a village where everybody can contribute to the common knowledge, to common solutions. In this case, providing the services for delivery and the kind of common, platform to address one of the biggest problem in cities that are complex, that have problems, and they also address in the second project where you share information about hotspots and security and so on. I think in the case of IDA, we are really thinking about how more people can be involved in crowdsourcing and bringing their resources through some of the bonds that they're going to issue, or other ways that you could have direct involvement of people in financing, really what we would call impact financing in the most, challenged countries in our constituency. So I'm very honored by the opportunity to address you, and I would just try to give a sense of how we're trying to bring innovation to everything that we do at the World Bank to address old challenges as well as new challenges. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Joachim, for these valuable comments highlighting IDA, and very much right to talk about IDA this year, not just of the replenishment, but for what you said as well, that this particular replenishment is witnessing the biggest wave of new ideas and innovations in partnership with the private sector to enhance the impact of IDA and its scale. And you will be finding lots of information on IDA and the replenishment almost everywhere, from your entrance, as you mentioned, Joachim, to our websites, to variety of different ways of outreach that the excellent team leading it are working on through the social media included. And we talk about IDA because it is really finance for development in action. All of the good ideas that you may have seen in the Addis agenda, how to get better mobilization of resources from all sources of funding to have an impact on sustainable development, you will find it there, with an emphasis on the poorest countries, as mentioned by Joachim. And one of the good things as well, I have been, as an academician myself at Cairo University for many years. I'm still associated with this university till now. You can always have good ideas coming from bright minds, academicians and students. But it's very rare opportunities to see these ideas directly exposed to decision makers and those who can really read your ideas, like Joachim, like Nena, and like Ms. Tara Nathan from the private sector, and to have the possibility of the collaboration and partnership and transforming these ideas first through recognition, and then who knows, that could be developed in a kind of a business transaction or a project to be developed going forward. I'm saying that because 20 years ago I started something not really as big, but simulation on the stock exchange in Egypt, and now it's still surviving. I left the country 6 years ago. It's happening, and it's have been moving with the participation of the private sector. The best thing I learned from this is to leave the whole matter not to me and Georgie, but to leave it to the students to run it. It will have a life of its own. After 10 years, 20 years, I hope it will move on. They may not remember who did it. Others may claim that they were behind it. Not you, not me, as it happened in Egypt as well. But as in good things, good commodities, good ideas got stolen as well. So we hope that it's a free public good. So if you have it, please develop it and share it. Now, our good partner from the very beginning of launching the ideas for action, Nena Stolkovic, the Vice President for International Finance Corporation, who is responsible in more than one way in different areas related to partnership and enhancing the role of the IFC, our private sector arm of the World Bank Group, in partnership with the business sector. Nena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mahmoud. Thank you, Joachim, and thank you all for letting me be part of this exciting panel. The most exciting thing for me is to see so many young people in the room. This is not typical for this building, and I think we need some energy and all these great ideas from you. I deeply believe that we need the voice of youth on many, many things, but I think most importantly on what you actually are trying to do through Ideas for Action, which is how to solve some of the most complex development challenges. And thank you all who participated in this year's competition. For IFC, for myself personally, it's great to be yet again a member of the reviewing committee, and it's truly an enjoyable duty. As you know, about 80% of young people live in the developing markets, in the emerging markets, and this is where those challenges are more prominent than in some of the developed markets. And you don't need to be 25 years old or younger to be excited about sustainable development goals and what we collectively need to do in order to get there in 2030. As Mahmoud mentioned, my background is in the private sector, and IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. So I'll probably stick to private sector, but I also deeply believe in the partnerships with the public sector, which I will also talk about. I mean, of course, there is a great role for private sector, especially in terms of supporting job creation. 90% of jobs in the world come from the private sector, also addressing some of the blockages in infrastructure, which Joachim mentioned. And I think a lot of support to inequality and removing inequality, whether it is in access to finance, creating opportunities to women. So very excited about the role of the private sector in SDGs. I also wanted to remind all of us that about 1.3 billion people now live in poverty. That's 1/5 of the world's population. And we have 14 years to reach the world without poverty by 2030. And when we look at poverty and where it will be by 2030, it's mostly going to be in some of the most difficult countries, which we call fragile and conflict-affected countries. So 1/3 of poor people by then will actually be there. So I think Mahmoud hinted it, Joachim talked about IDA. This is where we need to act together. This is when we have to come up with those solutions. And then when you look at the financing needs, we will need $7 trillion by then to kind of hit the SDGs, $4 trillion in emerging markets. So the question is, where is that funding going to come from? Of course, it cannot be only from the public sector, especially in the current context where many governments are struggling with budgets and also the ODA is going down. And this is where there is a huge opportunity for private sector to partner with the public sector and come up with that financing. I'm most excited about SDG 17. To me, that's the underlying success factor for all the other SDGs, because we have to partner together to make it happen. And I think Joachim hinted it. I see a great role for public sector to unlock some of the obstacles for private sector to come in. That's why we are excited with the partnership with with IDA, where we can actually get IDA to work with the governments to work on the regulatory framework for renewable energy, for some other sectors as well, where we can then bring pioneering private sector investments and then bring others to help us finance some of those transformational pioneering projects that can hopefully create market or open up a market for private sector to be more present. And to me, the role of the private sector is really in financing and in innovation in financing, including innovating around new financial instruments, but a lot more also in bringing actual innovation in terms of some sectoral improvements, role of technology in some of the sectors, and that's where the most exciting support from the private sector can come in. When I look at what has happened in the renewable energy space, especially now in Africa, where we're able to generate energy and prices much lower than the ones that we are paying in some of the developing countries from regular sources or the more traditional sources, it is absolutely fascinating. Or when I look at what technology what role technology will play in access to finance or in logistics, or I mean, many of the sectors that we're used to will actually not operate in the same way in the future. And what all of that means for Africa, will there be a leapfrogging to that rather than following the traditional development part? So this is where we also need some of your ideas and help to kind of innovate together. And then maybe last thing that I wanted to say in closing is really SDGs are very tall call for action, and there is a sense of urgency there, and that's why I think we want to draw that the energy and the ideas from you. And I would really like to congratulate all the winners and runner-ups in this competition. We absolutely need all of those ideas, and we can maybe do something on our side to help maybe make some of them implemented, and would very much like to be engaged in that as the next step. So thank you all. And now back to Mahmoud.
Right. Thank you so much. And we'll share with you, Nena, all details, not just of the winners and their proposals, but the rest of the list. Many of the ideas were basically as good, and you were involved in the selection, and you saw how difficult it was to pick the winners. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Tara Nathan, the Executive Vice President for Public-Private Partnerships, MasterCard. First time I met her, it was at the margins of discussions of the World Economic Forum councils, and she was using her different skills. She started as a diplomat. She worked in the banking industry, now with MasterCard, in order to provide solutions to one of the most complicated problems of our lifetime. It's basically dealing with the challenges that the refugees and the forced displaced and the forced migrants are facing in their communities. And she was trying to give ideas and to offer some solutions, while everybody at the time was talking only about how overwhelmed, for good reasons, they are with the problem. So I'm very happy to have you with us, Tara. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to participate. Very excited to be a part of it. I think most of you. I think in the past, probably everyone had this misconception that MasterCard was a credit card company. Hopefully, that notion has been being disabused over the past few years, and most of you folks who are in the know recognize that we're actually a technology company in the payment space, and that we lay digital infrastructure around the globe that enables payments and financing and commerce to happen. But what I'm growing increasingly excited about is the notion that many more folks are starting to recognize us as a company who's trying to help change the world and trying to have a direct impact. And we were recently bestowed the honor with Fortune magazine to be named one of the top 10 companies affecting change on the world. So I think this topic of how private sector engages in the Sustainable Development Goals is something that's near and dear to my heart, but frankly very near and dear to sort of who we are as a company. Not only is it so embedded in our core objectives as a company, do we have this notion of being a force for good in the world. So if you can imagine that. In our corporate objectives, top 10, it says we want to be a force for good in the world. pretty cool. But what you'll hear if you talk to our CEO or any of the top executives at MasterCard, which is quite interesting, is that no one person owns this objective. It's really owned by our entire company. We own broader objectives around financial inclusion. And the CEO will be very quick to tell you that no one group owns it. And it's definitely not a CSR initiative. It's definitely not a public policy initiative, right? It's the core of the business of what we do. What I thought I'd try and do today is maybe take some of the comments that were shared earlier today and take them from a corporate perspective and how we approach innovation and how we're approaching sort of our engagement with the SDGs. But I think that the first thing, I'll share with you sort of 5 points, right? The first one is this notion of leveraging your core competency and doing what you do. I like to quote my little cousin. We have a range of cousins in my family. The oldest is 65 and the youngest is 25. So it's quite interesting, the sort of breadth of generational experience and language. But my youngest cousin taught me a great expression, which I now use whenever I speak. And she said to me, she said, Tara, you do you. You do you. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? You do you. And I realized it's this fancy Wharton term that I learned, which is leveraging core competencies. Okay, that's really what it is. And that's what we do at MasterCard, right? And where I think private sector has the greatest ability to impact change. Don't go to a consumer packaged good company and ask them to, lend blankets. Don't go to an electronics company and ask them for cash. Ask them to do what they do. So yes, I think companies can play a key role from a financing perspective, but I think where we really have the opportunity to have true impact and leverage in accomplishing the Sustainable Development Goals and other things is really by doing what we do and applying them to social good. I'll give you an example. So Mahmoud made a great introduction to some of the work we're doing in humanitarian response. We do, like I said, we lay digital infrastructure around the globe. So one of those products and solutions that we have is a prepaid card. What we've been able to do now is leverage that prepaid product, prepaid electronic digital product, and apply it to the delivery of humanitarian aid, thereby giving digital food to Syrian refugees across about 2 million folks across Lebanon and Jordan. We also work with, the World Food Program in those markets. We work with Mercy Corps and in Greece. And what we found is that this digital receptacle of aid transforms this notion of airlifts, right, and dropping bottles of water and rice into a market, which is not only very expensive and costly, but it doesn't create an infrastructure that can be leveraged for the future. So you're not building sustainable solutions. And what we've been able to do through our digital platform or through our prepaid program is now not only provide a cheaper, faster way that's more that has greater efficacy, but frankly also delivers beneficiaries dignity of choice. So they're not standing in line begging for a blanket. They've got a payment vehicle just like you or I would. So I'd say that's the first thing. The second thing that we really look at when we're thinking about how we approach innovation and frankly how we approach engagement in the Sustainable Development Goals is commercial. It has to be a commercial approach, okay? I think to the extent when I see the big failure in engaging the private sector up into this date, I've been involved in a lot of the SDG dialogue since the very beginning. And when I sit around the table, what I see are a lot of folks from CSR, from policy, from philanthropy. And while those efforts have great impact and they do a lot of good work, to me, if you're trying to accomplish the $7 trillion number that we're talking about, you're not going to get it through philanthropy and you're not going to get it through financing. What you need is a bunch of companies who come around a table, who innovate, who find something that they can do really well, that they can make money off of in a sustainable way, and that they execute, right? So since I'm talking to a young audience, I think one of the things that really entices me or that sort of intrigues me is that when we're thinking about innovation, it's really easy for us to jump to gadgets and gizmos. We like to see, and we at MasterCard really love it because we've got an innovation lab and we love putting things on iPads and bells go off and we've got robots. If you come to our tech hub in New York City, you'll see all kinds of crazy inventions and innovations. But when you think about innovation, I think about innovation of business model. Sometimes the technology exists already or the product already exists, but what really is required is innovation in the way you go to market, right? In the way you price, in the market participants. So I encourage folks, not just who are thinking about innovation, but frankly on the private sector side, sometimes, we think of it at MasterCard as innovation by subtraction. It doesn't always mean adding in, right? Sometimes it means taking what you've got and finding a minimal viable solution to solve a different need. The third point I'll share with you is get tactical. Just do it, right? I think we do a lot of stuff around this space where we talk. We talk about the issues and we talk about the size of the challenge and we talk about the issue. We talk about the enormity of the challenge. And I think one of the things that we sort of think about when we're thinking about innovation in this space and applying our core competency in this space is innovation to specific challenges with specific customers. So I'll give you an example of that, again, in the humanitarian space. We were approached by a group of NGOs who said, you know what, we love your prepaid product. It's serving 2 million folks all across the world, et cetera, et cetera. But frankly, we have a lot of pressing needs in some of these geographies where we don't have connectivity. We don't have time. We've got 72 hours that we need to get to market. We want all the benefits of the digital equation, but we don't have time to go look out for a bank partner. We don't have time to look at sort of know your customer, KYC types of regulations. And we don't have connectivity. What can you do for us? So we brought together a bunch of MasterCard core data experts, legal experts, franchise experts, mobile payments experts, et cetera, along with, most importantly, NGOs who were delivering aid across the globe. So we were joined by Mercy Corps and IRC and CARE and, you name it, sort of the big players. And what we did was together we designed a product that is now known as the MasterCard Aid Network that won a bunch of awards, and we're very happy about it. But what's important is we designed it around specific customers with a specific need. And as a result now, they have a solution that they can deploy at scale. So I would say, as we're thinking about this, we need to think tactically, and we need to think about specific people who have specific problems and innovate to those. A lot of folks have talked about designing for scale, so maybe I won't touch on that too much. But it's clear, I think, as we're thinking about what our solutions are, when we think at MasterCard about how we innovate and the way we come to market, we like to think about platforms versus apps, which I think is something that means a lot in this team, right? So when you think about what the MasterCard network actually is, right? We create digital connectivity between banks, consumers, merchants, post offices, governments, NGOs. How can you start to leverage that connectivity and that platform to serve a variety of use cases and applications, right? So as you're doing, for example, a humanitarian intervention or an intervention that's solving for a particular acute crisis, think about the long-term impacts. How can that same infrastructure be built once and leveraged twice, leveraged 4 times? Because that same infrastructure is what's required not just to get food assistance, but it's what's required to get access to electricity, to get access to food, access to healthcare, right? Access to medicines. So while we have that opportunity, let's make sure that we're building it right for the future. We're future-proofing it. And the last is really obvious from where I'm sitting, but I think I say design for digital. Let's not assume, we have a lot of talk about data and big data and digital being the future. It's not the future. It's the present, if not the past, right? And whenever we're doing any type of solution, I think we need to think about what are the digital implications and how can we shift from analog to digital in everything we do, whether it's power provision, whether it's payments provision, healthcare, because it's that access to data and analytics that's actually going to give us the engine, right, by which to make our processes and our interventions more effective and more efficacious sort of moving forward. So thank you with that.
Right. Georgie, you're very much the partner from the very beginning. You need no introduction. So the floor is yours.
No, It's easy.
Yeah.
Because I want to build on what you said. Don't go to a company and ask them, do this or do that. I think we did a similar stuff with Mohedin. We didn't go to young people and say, do this or that. We said, we will create opportunities for you to do what you think is priority and you feel passionate to make that happen. So this is the first feature of the initiative that is driven, it was initiated and is driven by young people. They have organized themselves. Marie is here, who created the first Idea for Action Club at Wharton. Now she's supporting creation of similar clubs around the world. We have Young American Business Trust here. We have a Young to White program in the World Bank. So these are all young people who really run the show. We are just here to make sure that that will have a much bigger impact and can be more easily scaled up. The other is, again, building on what you said, innovation. We are really thinking more in terms of scalable innovations, which have a much bigger impact. It's not just fixing the business model, but also impacting in a positive way the policy and business ecosystem, so many other innovations can flourish. Innovative partnerships. Everybody talks about partnership. Nobody really has done that in a very serious way to understand the challenges behind that and how much effort needs to be put in place to really make that happen. So that's about the innovation. Talking about innovation, critical issue usually forgotten are entrepreneurs. Do we have enough creative young entrepreneurs ready to take the risk, but at the same time to really implement cutting-edge knowledge? Which brings me to the third point, access to knowledge and knowledge sharing. It's not just a matter of being young. I mean, we all feel at some point of time young. The matter is, do you really have a relevant knowledge? It's going to make a difference for people in this planet. So emphasizing on quality, on knowledge, I think is critical. And we live, unfortunately, in time of high tolerance for people with very limited knowledge making very important decisions. And that's a disaster. Incompetence is all over the place. And it's up to you, really, you guys, to change the equation. And I think that's one of the main features of Ideas for Action. Your ideas are great because you really dig deep in utilizing what is the cutting-edge knowledge in that space. The final point of these things is the influence, because through this initiative and through the book, we really provide opportunities for young people to share their ideas and influence the decision-making processes by those who are in a position of making decisions. And this is one example of global event. But at the same time, equally, maybe even more important, is how relevant are these things at the local level? To what extent they change the situation on the ground? And we had a very interesting experience this summer with the summer school of the president of Macedonia. Nothing to do with the fact that I was born there. But what is fascinating is that in his summer school for young leaders, they generated 40 ideas. He spent 2 hours listening to these ideas and then asking the ministers to carefully look at these ideas, because some of them were completely non-traditional. So they have to, take under consideration, and these are the opportunities for influence. Let me just quickly mention 2 new activities. One is we expand the range of young people. Now we have successful pilot for high school students, 14 to 18. We are realizing how critical is that segment of young population. This is the time when many young people make important career decisions, and if you expose them to these issues, they can make right choices. And particularly, we are trying to emphasize girls' education and their choices in science and technology, engineering. And this is what we are going to practice this afternoon, and that's why we are partnering with the Engineering School of George Washington University. Another crazy idea, very unusual, we just completed, and our colleagues, the competitors are, the winners are very aware of that. We partnered with also Zaltman, using a ZMET, a methodology developed by Harvard Business School to better understand the mind of young people engage in innovation in development. I think I have 2 more minutes, just read one sentence on that. These young people see themselves on a heroic mission to empower the disadvantaged, inspire others, and improve the world. The journey is difficult, one on which they sometimes feel misunderstood, afraid, inadequate, and cynical. We'll explore further this, but without understanding the mind of young people, I think it is very, very difficult to provide this enabling environment. The last point, big stuff, Africa. Okay, it's fascinating that 2 years in a row, in the first 3 winners, we have proposals from Africa. What unutilized potential, and this brings me back, is there an enabling environment? So this creativity which comes to Africa reached the point of real-life implementation. And in that context, this is not about who at the end of the day will end up in the book, because we are also disseminating information so that the final say is the say of the market, the invisible hand, to decide what makes sense and what doesn't. And in that context, we have a fascinating example. Wharton alumni, after 2 years, hopefully making a lot of money in Wall Street, realizing that this is not what his life is all about. 6 months ago, he moved to Kenya to implement the proposal from last year of building road in rural environment. And we will be connected with him at the event which is taking place this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, thank you so much, and many thanks to you, Georgia, for sharing the new initiatives and the proposals. And if you are thinking that you are young, you need to think of the 14 to 18 years old who are going to be involved in the next wave of the ideas for action. And basically, those are the guys who are owning the 2030 agenda. They are going to be in the late 20s and early 30s when the SDGs are going to be finalized as we know them today. Right, so we have the 2 winners, Emeka Nudu, the winner for the 2016 Ideas for Action, Team DLVR. It's a team of friends and fellow students and former classmates from Nigeria at Covenant University there. And I'd like to give you the floor if you would like to use the podium. You are more than welcome. Please. Please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Hi, I'm here to talk about a solution for last mile delivery in Nigeria. As we all know, logistics are the backbone of trade and commerce in any society. And every economic activity has to do with physical movement of goods and services from place to place. In recent times, we've seen a lot of increased interest in last mile delivery. Lots of companies around the globe are looking at how they can reach their customers directly. But when you come from an emerging market like Nigeria, things are not so straightforward. There are lots of challenges that make this last mile delivery not as easy as you would think. There's an absence of postal infrastructure, bad addressing, and all sorts of challenges that make it very difficult for businesses to compete. When we took a closer look at the market, we discovered several interesting things. The first is that you have a large pool of young people who are able-bodied and who have mobile phones, and they are coming onto the workforce and they're looking for employment opportunities. On the other hand, you have small businesses who cannot afford to build out their own delivery services, build out their own infrastructure. So because of that, what do? They're forced to rely on the basic form of courier services, which is peer-to-peer delivery, where you give somebody you entrust a package to deliver it for you. But when you think about that, that's not very efficient. There's no system that governs that. So what it means is that there are a lot of inefficiencies, packages get lost, and there's no assurance that your goods and services can reach the final consumer. When we further looked into the market, we were able to see some trends. We found that there were young people who were already going around doing this delivery on foot. So you have a young person who has a phone and is making deliveries and saving up to when he can buy an asset that will help him expand his operations. So we could see that on one end, you have a lot of businesses who are looking for better delivery options. And on the other end, you have a large pool of people who are able and willing to take on employment. And that's how we came up with that idea. A platform that connects these two groups, a technology platform where people who need to send are connected to a pool of dedicated transporters who are addressing the delivery needs in communities around. And this technology platform has the advantages of, first of all, creating employment for people, increase employment, reducing the cost of businesses, of doing business, because small and medium scale businesses can focus on their core operations and they don't have to worry about the logistics. And as we applied for the Ideas for Action competition and we did the work to streamline our idea and fine tune it, we started to see several other potentials, even apart from the basics of employment and creating jobs. We could see that we're actually reducing the footprint on the environment because of these shared resources. And we also saw that this problem was not unique to Nigeria, but it's a problem that everybody in every emerging market faces, bridging this gap at the last mile. So it helped us to really think about what's the next step and think about the potentials of this idea, the potentials for scaling and the potentials for partnerships with other people who are interested in solving these problems. That's our idea for action, basically, that we can create a platform, and through this platform, communities of people in their local environments can help to solve these last mile gaps. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations for you and your team. And you might need to know that in the audience today, a group of private sector, as you have seen, some financial markets leaders, some representatives from the business sector, from the regional development banks, the Islamic Development Bank as well as here, and many people from the World Bank and the IFC and IDA included. And God only knows who's connected and watching on the web stream. So I hope that these ideas are going to be shared among the audience, as well as our good friend and colleague, a fellow Nigerian, Aruma Ote, the treasurer of the World Bank Group, who is here. And so some of your ideas could find some good luck in her she is the bank of the World Bank. So if we fail to get that mobilized, our last resort and front runner of ideas as well. Whenever we think of something, we see her ahead of the curve. We're talking internally about alternative finance, including Islamic finance. Now she's launching some good work with the Islamic Financial Stability Board. We're talking the other day about financial technology. She launched a workshop. And when those treasury guys are doing these things, while they like ideas and academic thinking and everything, given their background, but they mean money. So you need to watch what's going to be happening after these discussions, without any implication on you. I don't like you to think that you will have deeper pocket than what you have already. No do today. Right. The second place winner is Rafael Gafstani. And please come along, and congratulations to introduce your idea and your team.
Thank you very much. Okay, so like many people, I love my city. The thing is that cities aren't always the best place to live. You have crime, you have vandalism, you have traffic jams, all kinds of things that affect our quality of life. And that's why a couple of years ago, my team and I have the idea of this thing called Oinks. Oinks is a mobile crowdsourcing platforms that helps people move around safely in their city by sharing real-time information about what's going on in the streets. Things like danger zones, robberies, even garbage in the street. Right now, we are evolving to what we believe is the future of virtual assistants for traffic and security. We are now in the phase of every challenge that any startup has, that is validating the business model and validating the product. For the product, since launching, we had more than 150,000 registered users. That made us the most downloaded app in our country. We're very proud about that. And also, we got to the first place in the App Store in 11 countries in the region. So right now, so that's for the product. And we have an incredibly engaged community that was built from organic growth. So we're very proud about that. For the business model regarding that, we started with some advertising with good results, but after a lot of interviews with our users and a bit of mentorship, we finally realized our growth potential, and that is where we're going. The idea is to create a personal assistant to make better decisions for people that combines crowdsourcing, artificial intelligence, and bots. This freemium service is going to be a freemium service, will work as free users will have normal access to the information, and paid users will have access to intelligent predictive notifications in any platform they choose. It could be Facebook, it could be Twitter, WhatsApp, mail, whatever they want. And yeah, we're trying to validate that. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here in Ideas for Action. We hope this, and we believe it's going to help us scale with our project, and we're looking forward for it. We really think that OINX empowers people to create better city life experience. That is our main goal. And I want to invite you all to join OINX and be part of this change. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much. And as you can see in this book, there are other winners. They are not going to be presenting today. We have a team busy with their exams in Wharton, and we have a team that worked on insurance product markets for mothers in China. And we have another team worked on green bonds, and another team, the sixth winner, was a model for impact investing. And as you can see, we have developed the structure, highlighting the problem, getting an executive summary about it, and then providing solutions that could really be applied. We have a discussant, and I hope she is connected. Yeah, all right, okay.
I am connected. Can you hear me?
All right, yeah. Please, go ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon to everyone. And first of all, I would like to apologize to you all because I really couldn't travel to be there in person. As many of you know, we have a hurricane reaching the Caribbean right now, and obviously ensuring the safety and security of our people in that region was our first priority. But thank you very much for having me over video. I'm going to be short, as I know that we're short on time. But first of all, let me thank the World Bank and Wharton School of Business for inviting PepsiCo to be part of this initiative. It's a truly exciting initiative because in regions like Latin America and the Caribbean, our young people are almost 70% of the population. So 70% of the population in Latin America and the Caribbean is under 40 years of age. So basically, young people are really the architects of the future of Latin America and the Caribbean. And it is really with programs like these, like Ideas of Action, that we can create responsible leadership, something that I believe that we truly need to create the future that we need and want in the region. So it's great to see that this generation is really and truly passionate about sustainable development, being part of the solutions, being part of creating these solutions through their creativity, through their leadership. And that's really what's going to allow us to see old problems through new lenses, lenses that can actually help us create the right solutions that we need. Another really important part of this initiative and that I was really impressed with was the implementation of partnerships. At PepsiCo, we truly believe in partnerships. And it's really great when you can see an initiative where each actor has a clear and very clear and defined role. So you have academia, obviously, leading the initiative, development organizations like the World Bank providing the opportunity and including the voice of youth in processes and informal processes to be heard and be part of those processes. Young people, obviously, as the main actors with ideas and creativity, and the private sector with expertise and implementation of solutions. I completely agree with Tara, what you said. I was listening to the discussion all this hour. Philanthropic aid is really important to development. However, where I really think that private sector can have the largest impact is by bringing expertise and capability that we have in addition to funding. So very quickly, as an example, in PepsiCo 10 years ago, we created Performance with Purpose. This is the vision that guides our business, and it's basically our promise to deliver strong financial performance, but at the same time expand our portfolio of foods and beverages to include more nutritious offerings, finding innovative ways to supporting the environment where we operate and obviously improve productivity at the same time, taking care of our people globally, and investing in the communities where we operate. We truly believe in youth initiatives, and I'm very glad to see so many young people as part of this discussion and in this audience. Let me give you a quick example of another program that we have in Latin America directed to youth development. The Eco Challenge is a program that we actually developed with the Young America's Business Trust, who I believe are part of the audience right now. It also provides opportunities for youth to develop ideas and business solutions to environmental problems. I believe that's a truly win-win proposition and a win-win solution, because we are promoting entrepreneurship, but at the same time trying to solve some of the largest challenges that as an industry we have. And we've been able to incorporate a lot of these ideas as part of our business, and obviously the entrepreneurs as well as part of our business and our operations. So before I finish, I would just like to congratulate again the winners, the Lever, Owings, and Aku Research. I believe those were truly the most amazing proposals that I have read, very thorough, very complete. All of the participants and all of the proposals that we were able to review were really very good. It was very difficult to choose the winners, but those three were exemplary. And just let me finish with two thoughts for all of you developing innovations and entrepreneurship ideas. It's that, and for the winners obviously as well, is that the journey hasn't finished. This is really truly just the beginning of your development of your entrepreneurship opportunity. And the second one is that you need partnerships and networks to succeed. It's the most important part of making something a reality, is to knowing how to bring it and with whom to bring it to reality. So thank you very much for having me, and again, apologies I couldn't be there in person.
Right. Right. Thank you so much. And that was Gabriela de la Garza, the Director for Corporate Citizenship and Sustainability for PepsiCo Latin America. Are there any question, comment, idea for the panel? Any suggestion for the future work? All right. Anybody's unhappy with anything? Right, okay, so if there is nothing really of what you have in mind, we have an open agenda that could benefit from your proposals and suggestions going forward. Those two books, you'll find them in our repository, free of charge, since we adopted the open data policy, so you can download them, and you can offer the team of the students, Georgie and myself, and the very good team working with us, coordinated by Aru in my office, and many people who are involved heavily in the design of the work and this competition. Please share your ideas with them. I was just happy to tell you something that happened because of this kind of ideas spreading around. A couple of days ago, and my colleagues in my front office know this thing, we got a note from the president of the World Bank inquiring about a letter that he received from the president. Was it Macedonia, Farida, or was it Macedonia? Yes, okay. So this idea reached Macedonia. They had some experiments about it without our knowledge, and the president of Macedonia sent something to the World Bank thanking him for the idea, and the president, who's aware of this initiative, didn't know that we have some presence there, direct or indirect. So this is the power of ideas. When they happen, you don't need really to bureaucratize them. You don't need really to have a representative with big budget in the place. But if there is a good idea, you will find many good sponsors of it, as unfortunately some of the many bad ideas have sponsors. I wouldn't call them bad, but could be because of ignorance, at least. They are adopting these ideas. Having said that, it was a pleasure having you here today with this group of panelists representing all possible lines of thought in the bank that we have, and all of you with us today in this very beginning of a very exciting week of partnerships for development and for ending poverty. I welcome you in the bank, and thank you so much. Thank you.